Hey, what's up everybody? Michael from RogueDeckBuilder.com here, doing this for like a third time. I've recorded this like 3 times already. It was a little bit too long, so I wanted to try and keep things a little bit more concise. Hopefully this time works. So I posted a picture of this deck just earlier today. Decided to do a video on it because this is probably my next project deck, I guess you could say. Definitely going to be working on this one for the upcoming weeks or so, and just keep testing it. And hopefully, March 28th, I think, is the next standard FNM my local game store is having, and that'll be my first FNM that I'll ever go to, and this might be a contender to actually go to that tournament. We'll see how the meta looks at that point. So this deck was actually, I'll just give a little bit of background information on this deck. I was watching one of the Versus videos from Star City Games, and Brad Nelson was playing his Brave Naya deck, which is a Naya aggro deck similar to this one. It's playing some similar cards such as Loxodon Smiter and Fleecemane Lion and Dread Militant, but it is, of course, Naya colors, giving him access to cards such as Boros Charm and Mizium Mortars. And his deck, and of course, Gore-Clan Rampager, his deck is a little bit more of a combo-themed deck where he can Gore-Clan Rampage one of his guys, give it double strike with Boros Charm, and swing in for a lot of damage. This deck aims to be a little bit more resilient to decks like Green Red Monsters, Black White Midrange, which in my opinion are some of the biggest decks right now. Blue White Control is always going to be there, but there's not many decks that are specifically building to just kill out Blue White Control. So I think that's not really something that should be aiming for. Green Red Monsters, Gen Monsters, and Black White Midrange, I think, are going to be the decks coming up, as well as Red White Burn. And we're settling in more into a mid-range type era, it feels, with those decks coming up. So I wanted to build a deck that will work well against those ones. And so I was looking at his list. I wanted to go Bant because it gave us access to cards such as Detention Sphere and Rapid Hybridization. And those are a little bit interesting cards. I'll talk a little bit more about them when I get to them. But going Bant, I think opens up the door for a little bit more and makes us a little bit more resilient in the long run. And this is another tempo style aggro deck. So for those of you who don't know what tempo is a little bit hard to explain, but because there's like so many different definitions people have on the internet. I mean, if you Google them, I'm sure you'll find many different definitions of what tempo is in regards to Magic the Gathering. But in regards, for this deck, essentially what it means is we want to be able to deal with very large threats our opponent has while being able to sneak in damage on our turn. So that means, they'll play a threat down, we'll remove it, slow it down, bounce it back to their hand, whatever. Play our own threat down. They'll play another threat down. We'll handle that one. Then we'll swing in for some damage. They'll play another threat down. We'll handle that one. Swing in for some damage, little by little. Putting down our own threats incrementally while taking care of their threats. Is essentially what the tempo deck wants. Is it wants a lot of incremental advantage. So whether that be through more efficient cards or better removal or more card advantage. Those are all forms of tempo that your deck can have against another deck, and that's why we're including cards such as Afara, Detention Sphere, Live Sky Knight. Those cards help us get incremental damage through card advantage, and hopefully through that we can overcome our opponent. And essentially, tempo decks want to race, and I feel this deck does a very good job in slowing down those mid-range type decks while being able to sneak in damage where we can. So yeah, I looked at Brad Nelson's list, decided to go Bant, and that's pretty much where this deck came from. And I decided to do this in video form as well. I was going to do an article about this, but I felt, typing everything out is takes a little bit too much time. And doing it in video form is a little bit easier for me to explain things, and I'm sure, as you guys know, I like to be very thorough with my explanations, so it's a little bit easier for me. It's also a little bit easier for you guys as well, so you guys can just listen to this and just do other stuff while you're listening to it. I will still put this up in an article, but I'll just throw the video in the article for RogueDeckBuilder.com, and then I'll just put a quick little deck list underneath the video, just so it's a little bit easier to access for some people. But yeah, let's get on with the meat of things, I guess. I'll try to keep this a little bit shorter than I usually do things. So first off, we'll start with the creatures, of course. We're running 4 copies of Dried Militant. Now, in Brad Nelson's list, he's running Soldier of the Pantheon and Dried Militant. I took out Soldier of the Pantheon because I wanted to make more room for some of our utility type cards. Plus, I feel with green red monsters in that matchup, especially there's 2 cards in there that roadblock Soldier of the Pantheon. That's Corso's Crufix and Sylvan Caryatid. Those 2 cards really roadblock that, really roadblock Soldier. And because we can't target it with Selesnya Charm, we can't even sneak over some damage and get through. Dried Militant, on the other hand, still allows us to do that, so that's why I'm still keeping that one in. And plus, green-white allows us to play off 2 of our colors on our deck, so it's a little bit easier to cast early on. The effect isn't very prevalent, of course, but, if we're playing against blue-white control, and they're playing the Elixir of Immortality route, we can at least exile some things so they can't get it back if the game goes on that long, which, of course, as an aggro deck, we really hope it doesn't. But, it's just a solid 2 1-for-1. Pretty much the only reason why I'm playing Dried Militant. And I know Soldier of the Pantheon's effect is sometimes prevalent. Getting an incremental life off, being able to protect it from, Reaper of the Wild and stuff like that. Might try including Soldier in the sideboard. We'll see. But right now I'm going to test with Dried Militant. The fact that we can target it with Unflinching Courage as well from our sideboard, and Selesnya Charm is actually pretty prevalent in this deck. Because it does allow us to swing into Sylvan Caryatid and Corso of Crufix and just pump up and being able to take them out, as well as keep our Dried Militant alive. So it's nice in that sense. Then for our 2 drops, we're running 4 copies of Daring Skyjack. Daring Skyjack is actually another card I like because it's another card that doesn't get roadblocked by Sylvan Caryatid, and being able to swing through that is very, very nice, whereas a card like Voice of Resurgence gets roadblocked. And we want to get damage early on to be able to just help us with a Johnny late game. So it'll just minimize the amount that we actually need to wait to use a Johnny's -3 to just do one final strike, or to swing out with Brave the Elements. And Daring Skyjack is nice because it's just a 3-1 for 2. Can't really complain about that. But the fact that we're already running a flyer means that if we have just another creature in Lie of Sky Knight on the board, we can essentially strike for 3 damage in the air, and that's 6 damage. That's a lot of damage. So it's very, very prevalent indeed. We'll see how it goes. I mean, I will test with Voice of Resurgence, but because I have a lot of these cards are a lot cheaper in paper, a lot cheaper than Voice of Resurgence, and I'm mostly a paper player, I'm going to test with Daring Skyjack first. Those are a little bit easier on the wallet, and I still think it's still quite a strong card in this deck. 4 copies of Fleece Mainline, another 3 power creature for 2, as well as the Monstrosity ability is very, very nice in pretty much every single matchup if we can actually get it off. So not much to say there. Imposing Sovereign, very, very strong card, I think, in this deck. It works really well. Again, goes along with what we want is we're slowing down our opponent's threats while allowing us to sneak in damage, and doing that over the course of the game is very, very strong. And of course, the main cards we're going up against are Pelucranos, Stormbreath Dragon, those types of cards. They all come in tapped, so it allows us to get in damage for that turn, while stopping Stormbreath Dragon's haste. It works really well against Red-White Burn as well when they're playing Ash Zealots and Chandra's Phoenixes. Prevents their haste from working, which is essentially their only reason to play those cards. Well, maybe not Chandra's Phoenix, but the haste is the most important part of those cards, I would say. And it also works well against Black-White Midrange because those decks play Obsidian, and so they do get incremental life, but at least when it comes back in, it comes in tapped, so they can't actually swing 3 for 5, which is very, very strong for them. So shuts down that as well. Only running 3. I think we'll see it often enough that it'll be effective, but I didn't want to have this card. It wasn't a card that I wanted to see 2 or more in my hand, and so that's why I'm only running 3 to make room for some other things. So moving on to 3 drops, we're playing 4 copies of Live Sky Knight. I really like Live Sky Knight. I know it's a little bit weaker because people don't really think Detain's that strong, but in regards to this deck, when we want to just... In this type of deck, 1 turn can usually mean winning or losing, especially when we have a small combo with a Johnny. So being able to slow down our opponent, again, going along with the tempo style of this deck, we want to slow down their threats, get in for some damage, and Live Sky Knight is probably one of the best cards to do that with. It's a 3/1 for flying, for 3 mana. Can't really complain about that. Plus, it's just keeps flying in the air. I mean, if they don't deal with it, and if they don't have any flyers in the air, we can essentially just keep swinging through for 3 damage a turn, which is very nice. Not much to say there. I really think it works really well in this deck, and it's nice to be able to detain non-creature things. You know, we're able to detain planeswalkers, which can be very prevalent as well. You know, especially against decks like Blue-White Control, when their +1 Jace can really hurt our damage output. We can play Live Sky Knight, stop them from +1ing for a turn, plus stopping them from trying to dig for cards for a turn, and then it allows us to potentially kill Jace or just hit them for another, 3+ points of damage. So yeah, works really well with this deck. Works really well with our curve, and it also stops Polukranos Monstrosity. I mean, it doesn't stop Polukranos Monstrosity, but because of how this plays out on our curve, green-red monsters essentially at their earliest, they're playing Polukranos on turn 3. And so we can Live Sky Knight, which protects our weenies for a turn while preventing Polukranos from blocking, so we can get at least, an extra 4 damage in, potentially 5, which is a lot of damage actually in those matchups and can mean the difference. The aggro decks want to be getting in every single point of damage they can, and because we don't have burn or anything like that, we really want to emphasize on that fact, and Live Sky Knight really helps out in that sense. Loxodon Smiter. Not much to say here. It's a 4/4 for 3. I'm going to probably switch out for Brima's. The reason is because Brima's works really well with Ifara. Normally, I'd probably just keep Loxodon Smiter in here, but because we have Ifara, Brima's works really well with her, and just will help us have a lot more of a chance of just drawing steady amounts of cards. And it still helps our board presence, and, Brima still creates white tokens, so Brave the Elements works against protecting our tokens from Mizium Mortars and stuff like that. So it's very nice indeed. We do lose out on 1 natural power, but I'll have to test. We'll see how Loxodon Smiter does, but it's more than likely I'm going to be replacing it with Brima's, just because we're running Ifara, almost. But we'll have to see how Loxodon Smiter does. I mean, in black-white mid-range and mono-black, I mean, maybe the rare chance we get, 2 Loxodon Smiters and a handful of lands, and they thought seize us. I mean, it happens, but that's not really the reason why we're playing it. It's the only reason why I'm playing it. Can't be countered, as well as a 4/4 for 3. You'll notice that we are playing quite a few creatures that have a good power compared to their mana cost. So, like, for example, Loxodon Smiter is a 4/4 for 3. Fleece Mane Lion is a 3/3 for 2. Daring Skyjack's a 3/1 for 2. Dried Militant's a 2/1 for 1. So as you can see, we want very efficient creatures for damage wise, compared to their mana cost. It really helps out. So that is our creature base. 25 creatures. We'll see how it works out. I mean, there are different things we can test, of course. Soldier of the Pantheon in the 1-drop slot, Voice of Resurgence in the 2-drop slot, and Brima's in the 3-drop slot are probably the main changes I would make and the main things I'm going to be testing out. But we'll see how this first version does. So moving on to the non-creature spells, we're running Ifara, 2 copies. With cards like Detention Sphere, Johnny, Live Sky Knight, it's not very hard to get Ifara online, as well as it helps in those longer matchups when we want to start drawing more cards, and Ifara just potentially helps us get a steady amount of card draw going, or at least, a few extra draws per couple of turns is really strong. And so it is one of the reasons why I'm thinking of switching out Loxodon Smiter for Brimas, being able to get three cards per round of turns essentially. 3 copies of Detention Sphere, not much to say there. It's probably one of my favorite removal spells in Standard right now. Hits everything other than pro white cards, but it hits Planeswalkers, stuff like that, and we have ways to deal with Planeswalkers. We have like evasion to just kill them, but being able to just de-sphere them and then use our creatures to actually just hit them in the face is a little bit more what we want, and we can still hit pack rats, we can hit demons, we can hit Pelucranoses, we can hit Reaper of the Wild, we can hit a lot of those cards, of course with Crewfix if we have to. We have a lot of options with the Detention Sphere. Underworld Connections is one as well. And then we're running 2 copies of Ajani, Collar of Pride, so this is where sort of our combo little aspect comes from, because I did want to keep some sort of combo in this deck, because I think just in aggro decks having that little bit of burst potential is very, very strong when you want to close out the game, and Ajani really helps that out, just giving Loxodon Smiter or even Fleecemane Lion flying a double strike that's 6 or 8 damage in a turn, even more if we have Selesnya Charm equipped to that, and very, very strong. And because we're not playing red, we don't have access to Boros Charm, which is why I'm running Ajani. Now, some people run Ajani or Spear of Heliod. I wanted to have the burst potential, so I chose Ajani. We might see how Spear works, but I think Ajani is a little bit better, at least in this deck. 3 copies of Selesnya Charm for taking care of, more ways to take care of Pelucranos. Again, a lot of the main threats that we're having to deal with, Desecration Demon. But the pump that it gives is very, very prevalent. I can see myself using the +2/+2 and trample a lot. And, the least amount, well, the most least used mode. Wow, that took a while. It's been a long day. The least used mode would be the last one, of course. We might use it for the 2/2 token. We can flash it in on their turn for a Ifara trigger. We can use it to flash in and block a weenie if we have to trade. But the pump and the exiling is the main thing we're going to be using. It is a way to get rid of gods as well if they end up being creatures. The main one being Thassa. So it's nice in the blue-white or blue-white Devotion or the mono-blue matchup, where if Thassa is a very, very strong god and they get it online quite fast, so we can actually hit it with Selesnya Charm very early on in the game, and that will definitely set them back quite far. 3 copies of Brave the Elements. As you notice, all of our creatures are white. Not much to say there. If you're doing an aggro deck and all of your creatures are white, pretty much, you're going to be running Brave the Elements. Protects against Mizzium Mortars, spot removal if we need to keep our creatures on board, and helps in trade, stuff like that. Not much to say there. 2 copies of Rapid Hybridization. So this is an interesting choice, but it is one of the main reasons why I wanted to go blue. It's because I noticed that there wasn't really many answers in the blue-green section to get rid of 2 of the largest threats in Standard right now, which are Blood Baron of Viscopa and Stormbreath Dragon. And Rapid Hybridization kills them. And I mean, the 3/3 token they get is pretty irrelevant. We can essentially, with the way our deck plays out, we can outrace them, so not much of a worry there. It also knocks them out of the sky, so we can just fly over with Live Skynet for damage. But probably the main reason why I like Rapid Hybridization, the Naya deck has Mizzy Mortars to deal with Blood Baron and stuff like that, but that's a sorcery, for one, which Hybridization has a huge advantage over, being an instant speed card. But on top of that, it is only 1 mana, which makes it very, very mana efficient, which is, when you play these tempo decks, you really want efficient cards, and having access to even an extra mana can mean a lot when you're, holding up mana for Brave the Elements or something like that. Being able to rapid their guy and have those kinds of things up is very, very nice. And even we can use it, there's a lot of different ways we can attack with this deck, which is what I like about it. It's very versatile. And Rapid Hybridization can actually target our own guys if we absolutely need to. For like Imposing Sovereign or Dryad Militant, one of our, a couple of our weaker guys, if they get spot removaled or something and we don't have to use Hybridization for anything else, we can target our own guys, create a 3/3 token, effectively countering the removal spell, and creating a stronger board presence for us. So it's an option. I mean, not the main reason why we're playing it, of course, but it is an out that we have, and it's a way we can use the card, which is very, very cool indeed. So that's the deck. We'll see how this version goes. I mean, it's going to take a while to test it, of course, but I feel this is a very, very solid place to start, and a few of you agreed with me on the Facebook group, which is awesome. So we'll go into the sideboard. The sideboard was a little bit tougher to do, mainly because I've already felt that the main board had a very good matchups already. So the sideboard essentially just makes those matchups stronger when we need them. So if we're playing against a Grounded Monsters deck that is playing a lot more, Mizzy Mortars, or, they're playing Jund where they have Dreadbore and stuff like that, we might include, cards like Laviana of the 10th or something like that. So it makes matchups a little bit easier. But the sideboard essentially just, the way I built it, it allows us to go a lot of different directions with our deck, which is very nice. So we have an extra copy of Detention Sphere. Not much to say there. Very, very strong card. If we're playing against like Bant Planeswalkers, when there's a lot of Planeswalkers to target, we can get rid of those. Not much to say there. Premium removal spell. 2 copies of Lavinia of the 10th. This is going to be sort of a test card, but I think it actually works quite well in this deck. Still keeping up with the tempo theme, being able to detain pretty much their whole board if they're an aggro deck. I'm bringing it in against mono red burn, mono red aggro, red white burn, because it doesn't get hit by Mizzy Mortars, can't be targeted, and it's a 4/4 that swings through all of their creatures. So we really can race them, and we'll essentially in those burn matchups as well, we'll bring in Unflinching Courage. So Lavinia the 10th plus Unflinching Courage essentially means game over for them. A 6/6 with Trample and Lifelink, they really can't deal with that. And so Lavinia the 10th works really well in those matchups. So I really want to test this card. We'll see how it works out. But it is a little bit higher on the curve, being a 5 costing card. But we're only running 2 of them, and I don't think it'll be too much of a problem. 4 copies of Mistcutter Hydra, not much to say there. It's pretty much just a staple in every green-based deck for those blue-white control matchups or those mono-blue, blue-white devotion matchups. Even that with Unflinching Courage as well works really well against those decks. Another copy of Rapid Hybridization, when I think that we need a little bit more removal. 2 copies of Rootborn Defenses to be able to protect us from Supreme Verdict. 3 copies of Unflinching Courage. Unflinching Courage works almost, I might even consider just trying to mainboard this card, because it's just works really well in almost all the matchups. But I wanted to have a better mainboard for like Detention Sphere and a little bit more removal. So Unflinching Courage is really only going to be brought in for when I absolutely think I need it. But it's very versatile. It works really well with a lot of our creatures and most matchups, so can't really go wrong with that. To Unravel the Aether for more enchantment and artifact removal. We do have Detention Spheres and stuff like that, but being able to have an instant speed way to remove those things is very nice, as well as it's another way to remove gods without them having to be creatures. And not much to say there. I mean, because of what we have in the main board, I might consider trying to find other cards to put in the sideboard, but for now, I think Unravel the Aether is just a really good card for enchantment or artifact removal, and doing it at instant speed for 2 mana, can't really complain with that. So that's the whole deck, guys. I really hope you guys enjoyed watching this. Again, feel free to leave your suggestions either in the comment section of the video below, or on the website, since I'll be putting an article up there, or on the Facebook group, since an article will pop up there as well, I'm sure. But yeah, really excited to test this deck out. I think it actually has a really good chance of being quite strong against a lot of the popular decks in Standard right now. We'll see how it goes. Won't know until I actually play with it. But this is the first version that I have, and of course I'll keep you guys updated on how it grows over the course of time, and hopefully we can take this to FNM in the future. We'll see. But until then, I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you guys for watching.